Hi, my name is Rob, and you're watching me on Channel 11.
We think as elected public officials, we should do everything possible to avoid raising taxes and the tax burden on Illinois citizens.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bruce DuMont. Welcome to this special edition of Illinois Lawmakers. From border to border, bringing you the activities of the Illinois General Assembly. We're here in Springfield in the Speaker's Gallery this evening in the Illinois House of Representatives. It's quiet right at the moment, and we will be talking this evening about a variety of issues that are still unresolved here in Springfield. We'll be introducing you to a very hot topic down here that has divided a lot of people. It's been hard to put together. It's utility deregulation. It's changing the power game in the state of Illinois. We'll also be talking about the possibility of welfare to workfare reforms. The new federal welfare program, as you know, goes into effect on July 1st. It is affecting every state in the union. We'll talk about how that's playing here in the state of Illinois. We'll also be talking with State Comptroller Loleta Didrickson, who will be talking about some new accountability measures that she has introduced in her office. And we'll also be talking about education funding, the reform package that the governor has really staked his political reputation on, and the possibility of an increase in the state income tax. These are the hot issues still unresolved with less than a couple of weeks to go before the scheduled adjournment on May 23rd. And joining us to share his thoughts and expert analysis, we welcome Bernie Schoenburg, who's a columnist for the State Journal-Register. Bernie, always nice to have you with us. Let's begin by talking about Pate Phillip, because Pate Phillip, who's always been one of the toughest guys to get to talk about the possibility of a tax increase, he's sort of opening the door to the possibility of a tax increase.
Well, I think Pate has been around here for a long time, and he's really one of the old-time deal makers. You know, he, I think, worked well with the Jim Thompson style of governorship, where you get the leaders together and they really hash something out. Jim Edgar has been working at it in kind of a similar way, although without putting forth his own plan at first, letting legislators work together to come up with one, working with his staff. Now the fact that Pate Phillip says maybe we'll go for half the tax increase that this group, along with the governor's office, came up with, you know, as a possibility, that makes it more of a possibility.
Now, one of the things is that the governor has been talking about an increase of 25% in the state income tax, going from 3% to 3.75%. What some Republicans are talking about in the state Senate is the possibility of going from 3% to 3.4%, which is about a 13%. However, that would bring in $800 million into the state. But the other thing that is factored into what Pate Phillip is talking about is that $350 million in sort of a rosier picture, a rosier revenue projection.
I think it is usual for legislators to look for an out, to say that instead of going all the way to 3.75%, going all the way to that 25% increase, we did knock it down. It is very usual for members of the legislature, in times when they're having to talk about new revenue, to talk about natural revenue growth. We've got very low unemployment, a lot of people are working, more money is coming into the state. That looks like they've done something without any pain. And if they can make it look that way, they're a step ahead, and they can say, we really worked to cut down what that proposal was.
Now, there's a lot of people who feel that there shouldn't be any increase at all, and they frequently talk about there has to be greater reforms, greater accountability by teachers. And Pate Phillip, again, in his comments this morning, basically said there isn't going to be any more money for anything unless there's some real reforms. What type of reforms is he talking about?
Well, I think one of the things that has been talked about really from people on both sides of the political aisle is doing something about teacher tenure. I think everybody has heard of the horror story of the bad teacher you can't get rid of. The unions say, of course, that tenure is there not to protect teachers from eventual firing, but to give them due process. If there is something done to cut down on that protection, to make it appear that it's easier to get rid of a bad teacher, that's one way they're going to do it.
And also changing certification for some teachers, for people who want to give something back to their schools but have not gone through education courses.
Well, that has been kind of a hot topic, particularly among, I think, more Republican conservatives and people that the teachers' unions aren't necessarily always aligned with. So yes, if there is a way for people to get in the classroom, that's probably something that will again be seen as a way to help the schools, as a way that we are doing something in exchange for asking the voters out there to pay a little more in taxes.
Another great deal of focus this past session has gone on Judge Heupel, Supreme Court Justice Heupel. What is the latest? There's going to be a verdict on Judge Heupel on Friday of this week.
Well, there's supposed to be a recommendation from the 10-member bipartisan special committee of the House, which has determined if he should be recommended for impeachment to the full House, and then if that happens, it would go over to the Senate to try him. He has already, during this process, he's been censured by the Illinois Courts Commission for misbehaving during traffic stops and some other offenses. He has apologized. He has given a day of testimony explaining himself, including one time that his wife was sick and he wanted to get home quickly, and a tearful Judge Heupel we saw. So there have been some things happen. His best move probably has been to hire Governor Jim Thompson to be his lawyer, who says, I don't see anything impeachable here, and it wouldn't be a surprise if it came out that way.
So that's basically the mood at the moment is probably will be favorable to Judge Heupel? I
would think it's probably shifted in that direction because people can say he's off the top chair in the Supreme Court because he stepped down as Chief Justice.
Bernie Schoenburg, thanks very much. It's always nice to have you with us on Illinois Lawmakers. Well, we've talked about deregulation of electric utilities, reform of school finance, welfare to workfare. These are just some of the issues that are still on the table here in Springfield. And tonight, Jack Titchener reports that Illinois lawmakers have their work cut out for them if they really want to get out of here, as scheduled on May 23rd.
Legislative leaders still have lots of questions about the $1.8 billion package of school spending increases and property tax relief outlined earlier by a bipartisan panel of lawmakers and members of the governor's staff.
To ensure we have continuing funding in the out years. We don't want to get caught as we got caught with the lottery. We're putting money in on new income tax at the same time money's going out the back door. So we need a continuing education appropriation.
A 25% income tax hike would fund the plan, but it still comes up nearly $400 million short. And there are many lawmakers who are skeptical of the need to hike taxes in the first place.
We think that very simply the last thing we should do is raise taxes. Now, if it's needed, if you have to do it, it's the only way we can find the money necessary, then you do that. But we think as elected public officials, we should do everything possible to avoid raising taxes and the tax burden on Illinois citizens.
Senate President Pate Phillip wants school accountability before he talks taxes. House Speaker Michael Madigan says lawmakers also want to see specifics of property tax relief and the winners and losers in how the funds are distributed to schools.
That problem has been raised by a variety of people, and our plan is to work with the governor's proposal to try and correct those defects. There wasn't anything that came up in there that I was surprised with, but I was pleased with what I felt was a very constructive nature of all four of the leaders and what they did have to say and what they offered in this discussion, an agreement to continue on a variety of fronts to work on coming up with a resolution.
This week, Mayor Richard Daley brought a taste of Chicago to the education talks. Daley wants to make sure there's money to rebuild crumbling schools.
Just talk about the tax for infrastructure. That's the only way, basically, you can get money for the infrastructure. There's no other formula to get money for additions, new schools, renovating schools at all in Illinois.
After education comes utility deregulation. Lawmakers have the tough task of balancing the interest of residential consumers like you and I, the business and industrial customers, and the interest of the utility industry itself. Not a little task.
I don't think it's a good situation where you have industrial customers going first, residential customers waiting till sometime well into the future without seeing any benefits of the competition. So what I'm looking for is a plan where either everybody comes in virtually at the same time or phased in over a short period, or that customer classes who aren't phased in, who aren't part of the competition, at least are able to experience some savings from their electric bills.
Lawmakers are also concerned about so-called stranded costs left over from nuclear power plant construction. Some think utilities should absorb the cost. Others aren't so sure.
We found that there was a lot of expenses. Some of them were overruns. Some of them were required by the federal government because they changed the standards of safety, and so they had to put in a lot of money to comply with federal safety rules. If you deregulate and completely say, well, you're not going to get any of this stranded cost, all those people who invested their money, who are using it for retirement, understood the risk that they were going to be taking on that. And now all of a sudden you change the rules and say, well, you're not going to get much money back on your investment. That's not fair.
The stakes are so high and the issue so complex that some lawmakers say deregulation may wait till the fall veto session. Lawmakers are also trying to reconcile issues left over from last year's federal welfare reform battle.
We believe the folks ought to come in, they ought to be assessed, whatever the needs are, if it's education, if it's training, we'll work with them to identify those needs so that no one just comes in and gets eligibility determined and sort of gets set aside.
We don't want to coddle anyone, but we want to make sure that everyone actually gets the basic needs that people need to survive.
For Illinois Lawmakers, I'm Jack Titchener.
Joining us now on Illinois Lawmakers to talk about utility deregulation in the state of Illinois, we welcome State Senator William Mahar. He is a Republican from Orland Park, and he is chairman of the Senate Energy and Environmental Committee. And also with us, representing the House, we welcome State Representative John Philip Novak. He's a Democrat from Kankakee. He is chair of the Energy and Environmental Committee in the Illinois House of Representatives. Thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Let us first of all talk about the difficulty. The two of you really have been wrestling with the issue of deregulation of the utilities for about 2.5 years now. Where is it right at this moment, Senator? Because it's off track.
Well, at this moment is one of the most critical times. We're looking to put a bill together to have our membership vote on probably next week, and we still don't have all parties on board. So consequently, Phil and I are spending incredible hours trying to find a consensus. But I think both of us believe that we're going to have a vote next week. Now, everyone who at least gets a bill from Commonwealth Edison, which represents about 75 or 80% of the people in the state of Illinois, they got a little red folder with their bill just a couple days ago that said that Commonwealth Edison is really behind this and we're really all for it. Is that true?
Yes, it is. Okay. Commonwealth Edison, I think, believes the inevitability of utility restructuring in Illinois. Other states have done it, such as California and Pennsylvania, and I don't think we need to be behind the 8 ball when it comes to deregulation. Other states around us are in various stages of discussing deregulation. Illinois has the opportunity to have probably a model piece of legislation that other states can follow, and I think the senator will agree with me.
And we should mention that there's really only a handful of states. California and Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island are just a handful. I guess it's moving through Hawaii.
Oklahoma and Montana, I believe, just passed deregulation laws. I think Texas has a proposal. New York, their Public Utilities Commission, is in a position to deregulate the utilities.
Now, we should mention historically that a couple of years ago, it was Illinois Power, another one of the major power players in the utility field in Illinois. They were the first to say, we have to deregulate. Why does a utility take the leadership in wanting to deregulate their own industry?
Well, that was Senate Bill 1058, which they offered, and that really started the ball rolling. There's no question about that. But the inevitability is that this is not a phenomenon just in Illinois. Obviously, this is a phenomenon that's occurring across the country. And what our responsibility is to come up with sound public policy to ensure that not just the generators, but the consumers are treated fairly and equally. And that can be a very difficult thing because we have small consumers, we have small generators. We have large consumers and large generators. So we're trying to find a mix, but we're not going to guarantee any longer will the ratepayer guarantee a profit to the shareholder. That's gone.
Now, about 48, 72 hours ago, it looked like it was almost a done deal. What's happened in the last 72 hours?
Well, we concluded our meetings that we had that all the stakeholders were at the table, besides the senator and myself and my co-chairman, Representative Prosico. And I want to point out that this is a bipartisan committee in the House. Besides us and all the stakeholders, we concluded the meetings. We achieved major objectives into a deregulation bill, as I indicated. So we've got some great consumer protection provisions in this bill. Just the concept of obligation to serve. What does that mean? That if you leave a utility and you don't like the power source from your new utility, you have an obligation to go back to your old power supplier, and your old power supplier, let's say Commonwealth Edison, has to take you back. That was a major bone of contention with the utilities. We forced them to agree with that. It's the economic issues that we have yet to come to closure on. We're very close.
Is the issue of how much one of the utilities is willing to give back to the customers in some sort of a give back or a rebate or a discount, is that the sticking point now?
Well, the issue is that all consumer classes need to be treated fairly. Not all consumer classes need to have access to the market to give them choice necessarily immediately. But it all boils down to a cost per kilowatt hour, whether the residences are going to benefit and how much. If they don't, then we got a problem. It's up to Phil and I and Vince and the law and the policymakers now to say, okay, we've heard 2 years of testimony. This is what we think is fair, and this is what we're going to do.
But when I get my bill as a consumer, I get my bill and I hold it up a year from now, if this goes through, is my bill going to be bigger, smaller, the same, and how much reduction is there going to be in that bill?
A year
if
from
there's
now?
going to be a reduction at all.
A year from
now, 5 years from now, 10 years
there
from
will be not only a reduction on your bill, but it's going to indicate what the reduction is. So you're going to know how you benefited from deregulation because that will be printed on the bill.
Is that what you've got to deal with right now? The percentage of what that reduction
Part
is?
of it.
Part of it, yes. And we want an immediate rate reduction. We're looking at sometime early next year.
Do the power companies want to give that up now?
I think the power companies are encouraged to agree to that provision.
How are you encouraging them to do that? I mean, obviously, as representatives of the people, you would like to be able to go back to your respective constituencies and say, we helped together, collectively, bipartisan in way, we helped reduce your electric rates. What are the utilities saying at this moment in time?
Well, what they're saying, the situation is they've been doing business in Illinois and across this country the same way for 100 years. And to get them to change that mindset sometimes is a little bit difficult.
Right.
Okay? But we're going to do it. You know, and they know we're going to do it. They know that Phil and I are serious. And, you know, it's either to give us some positive input or get off the track because the train's starting to roll.
See, the utilities, Illinois Power and Commonwealth Edison, make up about 95% of the service area in the state of Illinois. And you have major power marketers outside the state of Illinois that are just chomping at the bit, ready to come into Illinois and provide power from other sources of energy to consumers in Illinois. So the utilities know that, okay, if we're going to let them come into our market and compete, we want to make sure everybody's on a level playing field. So the host utilities, such as Commonwealth Edison in our area back home, Bruce, they want to provide incentives to people to stay with them. And one of those incentives is a rate reduction.
Now, one of the other concerns, however, insofar as a concern that a company would have, is that a company like, again, any one of the major power companies, they've invested significant amounts of dollars into investments, whether it's nuclear power. And again, all of a sudden the rules get changed. It's going to be more difficult for them to sort of pay off any obligations they have. I mean, I think the term is stranded liability. I may have the term wrong, but what exactly does that mean? And I mean, that's a very serious and viable concern that the utility companies have,
well,
right?
Sure.
Representing their stockholders.
Sure. A stranded liability is one that you can't depreciate overnight. It's a nuclear power plant. We have taken the position of trying to find the middle ground where some companies may want 100% reimbursement for that. There's others that want no reimbursement for it. We're going to find some middle ground that we think is fair. And we've got some numbers that we're approaching people on virtually as we speak.
It has been suggested to me that if we were to look at what the give back by the utilities is going to be on this negotiating point, that it's somewhere between 10% and 20%. I think Senator Phillip was talking about 20% on the higher edge. Is that a ballpark where we might come down between those two figures?
Talking about to the residential community?
Yes, to the residential community.
That's in the ballpark.
And I'd agree.
Is it closer to the higher edge or the lower edge? Do you want to comment on that? When do you next meet? When will this matter?
We're going to meet in 5 minutes.
In about 5 minutes.
We have a meeting, another meeting. Our major meetings are over with all the stakeholders. The legislative process now takes over, Bruce.
Is it now, is this something that has to be done in the spring session?
Yes.
Or do you have to basically start all over again?
We've
said it's not going to happen in the
Senator
fall.
Mahar and I and my co-chairman, Representative Prasico, we've invested too much time, over 125 hours, sitting at tables, debating probably one of the most boring laws on the books in the state of Illinois, the public utility law.
Right.
So we've invested so much time and energy. We do not want that to go wasted.
Right. But obviously very important and something that will have ramifications for a long, long time.
No question.
Senator, Representative, thank you very much for joining us. As we mentioned, there's a lot of issues going on here. One of the biggest ones is the whole issue of school finance funding. And we talked with Illinois lawmakers, and we asked them, what should be in a successful school funding reform package?
We've put together the outlines of a program. Some of it is pretty specific, others are pretty general, but it deals with funding, it deals with expenditures for education, it deals with property tax relief, and there's a long list of possible reforms that would be included.
From my perspective, we must have, as part of that school funding reform package, we must have meaningful changes in the way schools are run, the management of the schools, issues like tenure, certification, merit pay, holding administrators accountable for the way the schools are run. That must be part of the package.
I think suburban areas are really the linchpin to successfully executing any kind of agreement, because suburban schools feature the largest shift of population, the largest shift of resources, and if the suburbs are satisfied in the political end of the equation, I think we will have some successful agreement.
It's been talked about now for 2 years that we got to have property tax relief. I've always been an advocate that, you know, we shouldn't be funding education with property taxes anymore anyway. You know, any kind of relief we can give on property tax, you know, I'm really going to be supporting of that.
With the increase in taxes, we want to make sure that the kids obviously get a better quality of education, that they get good programming, and that this bill or this proposal is going to be fair and it's going to address those concerns.
My top priority is, as a legislator, is to make sure that we're not going back to Illinois families and asking them for even greater contributions from a financial point of view. I think the taxpayers have been very generous in this state toward public funding of education, and they should be, and they've done a good job.
We continue on Illinois Lawmakers from your state capital in Springfield. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. Joining us now to talk about welfare and the welfare reform that will be transpiring here in the state of Illinois. We welcome State Senator Dave Syverson. He is a Republican from Rockford. He is chair of the Public Health and Welfare Committee in the state Senate, and also representing the House, we welcome State Representative Mary Flowers. She is a Democrat from Chicago, and she is chair of the Health Care Committee in the House of Representatives, and also you're the senior member on the Human Services Committee. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. On July 1st, everyone knows, or a lot of people know, that the world of welfare and welfare recipients, their lives are going to change. Briefly describe for us, Representative Flowers, if you will, what is going to happen to those people who are currently welfare recipients in the state of Illinois? How does their life change on July 1st?
Good question. Welfare, as we know it, as July 1st, will no longer exist. But I don't know if the state is ready for the responsibility that we're responsible for as far as moving these people from welfare to work. I don't see a plan in place where the jobs, where the daycare centers. There's just so many unanswered questions, and I don't think we're prepared to deal with July 1st.
Senator, are you a little bit worried about what's coming up on July 1st as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think Representative Flowers is exactly right. There is a little sweeping change in the history of welfare that we're going to be going through. The federal government has thrown us some major components, but also they put in a number of stumbling blocks, and they've left us holding the bag financially on some issues, which is going to be a problem.
What are the stumbling blocks?
Well, one of the biggest issues, of course, is the legal immigration scenario. Illinois is one of the 5 largest states. The federal government has said to these individuals, we legally allowed you to come into the states, but now we're not going to take care of you. It's up to the states to do that. That's unfortunate, because that can have a price tag of anywhere from $30 to $100 million.
There's also a ticking time clock here, because you have 2 years to find a job, and in your whole life you can't ever be on for more than 5 years for the rest of your life. And we're talking about 127,000 people in the state of Illinois who will join an unemployment roll of already 333,000 people that are looking for jobs. What type of jobs are they going to find, and are they ready for them, Representative Flowers?
Where are the jobs? And you're right, are they ready for them? First of all, you have to understand that...
Huge question.
Absolutely. Welfare, this has been a way of life for people, so therefore they have become accustomed to it. Now, mind you, it was not right, and I have to say this in respect to all the welfare people out there. Years ago, people asked for a helping hand, not a handout. But that's exactly what we gave them, a handout. And as a result, this, again, has become a way of life. But now, where are the jobs? How are you going to, after a person been on welfare for about 10 or 15 years, and all of a sudden you're going to tell them, come July 1st, you're going to have to get up and go find your job. Okay, fine. Go find a job where? In the meantime, I have a job, but now I need daycare. I need training. I need transportation. I need some new clothes in order to become presentable. And then will the Medicaid that I'm accustomed to protect my children, is that still in place? So many unanswered questions. Where's the safety net with a $4 billion budget?
Where are they going to go?
Well, first of all, let's
talk about just the basic issue of training. Let's say you've never had to even apply for a job. There's some really basic things. Sure. Where do they go to learn that?
Well, there are some things that we're going to be doing. I think this is going to be a challenging time, but an exciting time. We've got the option and the ability now through some unique reforms to help tens of thousands of people move out of welfare into the work settings. There is current job training programs that need to be expanded. I think Governor Edgar is planning on appointing a job czar who will coordinate job training programs. We are going to be expanding daycare, anywhere from 70 to maybe over $100 million of new money going into daycare to open up new slots. Because we know for welfare reform to work, there needs to be job training, there needs to be daycare. Those are things that are going to be a top priority for the governor's administration and in the proposal we put together.
Once upon a time, former Vice President Dan Quayle, he said something that maybe shocked a lot of Republicans. He said that Republicans have been talking about, you know, getting welfare mothers, you know, back to work. But he said, we may be creating a bigger problem by forcing welfare mothers away from their home into jobs because the children may be left alone or the daycare safety net may not be in place. Now, that shocked a lot of conservatives when he said that, but are you concerned that maybe down the road, 5 or 10 years from now, that what has been billed as this huge welfare reform effort may be making the situation worse than better, Senator?
Well, I hope not, because for our state to become a strong economic state, some of these measures have to go into place. We need to address some of those circumstances, but through job training, through education programs, phasing people into these programs, I think there's a possibility that we can have positive reforms if there is daycare there, if children are in school, where individuals can go out and get the job training or be working during those school hours. I think it can be done. It's currently being done by mothers who are not on welfare. It can work for those who are on.
Representative Flowers.
My biggest concern, jobs, where are they? And again, phasing them into what programs? Again, we're talking about a $4 billion budget here. We're talking about 40,000 children on a waiting list without welfare reform. We're talking about not having enough daycare providers. Why would a mother want to leave their child home alone, or leave their child with a stranger, or leave their child with an untrained person who probably don't want to take care of their kids anyway? They're forced into the situation because of economic reasons. There are so many unanswered questions. And, you know, I think it's unfortunate. Women and children are going to suffer more under this issue than anyone else. They're going to be forced to work nights, leave their kids home alone, and then next DCFS.
Do you think that although many in corporate America may not admit it at the moment, but daycare centers at places of employment in the state of Illinois is going to be a fact of life, whether people want to acknowledge it now or not?
Oh, I agree. I think that's a growing, a very popular item. When we talk to employees, that's the #1 issue that they want is adequate daycare right there on the premise where it's easy. They can be there if there's a problem with the child. That makes a lot of sense, and we hope that there's going to be further expansion into that. The other point I want to make sure we realize is welfare reform is here. The federal government has passed it. Most of the laws are etched in stone, so people may be critical of what's happening. Right. We have to deal with it, and it is here. It's our job to make the best of what is going to be a bad situation.
Has there been discussion, with all the public schools that exist throughout the state of Illinois, has there been any discussion about keeping those schools open, maybe 18 hours a day, so that the local school becomes the place where not only parents who need to be trained to get back into the workforce, where they could go to be trained maybe from 5 to 8 o'clock at night, but they would also be able to bring their young children, and the daycare would take place after hours in the public school buildings. Wouldn't that be a way to use the public buildings of the state?
I have introduced similar legislation 2 to 4 years ago.
So it is a good idea.
It's an excellent idea. I agree with you 100%. Again, the programs are not in place, and I agree welfare as we know it needs to cease and dismiss, but we are talking about people's lives here. This is not a game of chance, and we won't get a second chance at it. We have to do it right the first time.
I want to follow through on that particular point. Is the use of the public schools after hours, is that part of maybe the long-term answer to this, where you deal not only with the issue of training, you deal with the issue of daycare, and also another issue that Senator Pate Phillip has talked about is the accountability and the recertification of teachers, so that maybe those who live in a community who want to give something back to that community, maybe they teach at night school, maybe they develop the mentor relationships with those who are on welfare who want to get off and go back to work.
No, you're exactly right. There's one more component.
It's a bringing of community.
Oh, that's right. There's one more component you're missing. That is the schools have all the computers and all the internet that are only there for a few hours a day. When the schools are open at night, individuals can be utilizing and accessing those very expensive computers that the states are putting into schools. So we need to be more creative. We're doing that with adult daycare now. We're moving them into no longer just 9 to 5 because people don't work 9 to 5 anymore.
Right.
So we need to be more creative, and I believe that under Director Peters that we're going to come up with some creative ideas, including some unique ways of either using schools or businesses or expanding hours, because we're going to have to do it to make this work.
Senator Syverson, Representative Flowers, thanks very much for joining us, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of reports in the years to come on Illinois lawmakers about how this very crucial point in the lives of hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans are going to be affected by the new welfare reform bill. Thanks very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
We've talked with Illinois lawmakers about a variety of things. Most recently, we asked them about their voters and what do they want to see happen here in Springfield regarding school funding reform.
They're saying don't increase my income taxes because I don't believe that there's going to be property tax relief. We agree that we need to take care of kids and we want to take care of teachers. But, you know, it sounds a lot like the lottery is going to go to education. Riverboat gambling is going to clean up all of our problems. And the last time our income taxes were increased, we called it temporary. This idea of the swap between property tax relief and income tax, they just don't believe it.
Basically that every child in this state be given an opportunity for an equal education, and that we relieve the burdens on taxpayers, that the state assume a greater responsibility for funding of education. I think that's the hopes and expectations of most of the citizens out there.
The concern that I heard was what in the bill would assure that the property tax reduction wouldn't be changed and it would just inch right back up again, and then you have that on top of the income tax increase. And are you going to lose the local control if the state becomes more involved?
They want to see something done. I mean, obviously they want something positive done. That goes without saying, but they're frankly very tired of the lip service and the people that talk a great deal about how important educational reform in the funding area is, and yet year after year come back with nothing. Either a Band-Aid goes on or nothing at all gets done.
In our area, we're fortunate as far as the level of spending. But I think that they'd like to see certain reforms, and I think that they also agree that every student ought to be at the 4225 level. And I think that they're willing to sacrifice now and not possibly take money in order to make sure that every student does get that.
They'll be willing to pay an additional income tax if they're sure they're going to get some property tax relief along with it, and ensure that we're going to fund education the way we should.
When you're talking power in Springfield, you're always talking about money, and now to talk more about money and efficiency in government, we welcome the State Comptroller, Loleta Didrickson. Loleta, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Let's talk a little bit about something that's going on right now that you have been dealing with for the last. Actually, you've been working on it for a couple of years now, but you've had kind of a hot week in Springfield.
Yes, I have.
And that is reduced paperwork. I mean, people look around these desks, they see stacks and stacks of paper. Anyone that's ever dealt with government is usually filling out all kinds of forms. And you have absolutely done something this week that's going to reduce paperwork. Tell us about it.
Well, interestingly enough, for us, 95% of all the information in the world is on paper. Only 5% of it is in electronic form. And of course, setting the stage and the table for the future is what we've been doing in the Comptroller's office. So this week we were successful and sent to the governor a record retention bill, which would allow us to reduce saving these paper records contracts and paper checks, if you would, from 5 years down to 3 years. And with the new system that we're putting in place in the Comptroller's office, the future is really electronic storage. So we have moved out of a facility that was costing us $240,000 a year approximately. We're going to save that annually by moving the legislation successfully to the governor's desk to reduce the number of years that we have to keep it, and then, of course, moving to the electronic format.
Now, when you ran for office, you talked that you wanted to bring it into the 20th century.
I'm dragging it there.
You're dragging it there. How are things going insofar as the whole computerization of your office?
It's very, very well. We're right on schedule. This summer we will put the new system in the Comptroller's office, the new financial management system. We will, I believe, be the first state to have the year 2000 solution built into our system. We will then be able to move this out to those separate 85 agencies that all have their own separate system and, of course, offer that to all of them. The potential for savings there is a one-time savings of $125 million and $25 million every year thereafter.
Now, earlier in the broadcast, we talked about a revenue projection for the state of Illinois, and that one of the reasons why Senator Phillip and some Republican members of the Senate are giving some consideration to a possible reduced increase in the state income tax, not as much as Governor Edgar would like, is that they have come up with additional dollars, that the revenue projection from 3 months ago is much rosier today, almost $350 million rosier. Another paper said it was $250 million. I guess my question is, someone who deals with dollars and cents and financial projections and assumptions all the time, how can there be that much difference? I mean, how can you just suddenly out of thin air come up with $350 million?
Well, actually, the economy's really been cooking in the state of Illinois, exceeding expectations the last 2 months, particularly with regards to individual income tax, corporate income tax. That's been growing 7% and 12%, and that is above what had been projected for revenue. We projected, and we don't project in the Comptroller's office. We account for. But the Bureau of the Budget projected a 5.5% increase in base revenue this year. I believe, and everybody believes right now, that we will surpass that. But to what extent, I can't tell you. Doesn't government, however, in its projections tend to lowball it so that they don't want those.
When situations like this, they can all of a sudden come up with $350 million as opposed to start having to look for it with 30 days to go?
Right, because they don't want the General Assembly to be spending it on non-priority items and to have them think that there's too much extra cash out there. The fact of the matter is that we don't have a truly balanced budget in the state of Illinois. On a cash basis, we do, but on a crude GAAP basis, we don't. And for example, last year, we had something like $950 million worth of last year's bills that had to come out of this year's new revenue growth.
So that's not really truth in budgeting then?
That's right. And so we've done something about that, though, this week. That's a nice door you opened up for me there.
What have you done?
Just today, we passed out of the House for concurrence back to the Senate a truth in budgeting bill that would say that when the governor and the General Assembly introduce their budget, that they can't just make revenue projections and then just say, this is how we're going to spend it through the appropriations process. They also have to look at the other side of the ledger and say, this is the pass-through liability from last year, the bills that had to come out of this year's revenue. And I believe that then will give a truer picture and will put the budget in a more truthful position.
When I'm talking with voters who either call me or write me emails, one of the things they frequently say is, you know, they still talk about waste in government, or they talk about people who aren't paying their bills. And recently there was a scandal in the city of Chicago where a lot of those who work for the city and even county were not paying bills that they owed, whether it's water bills or real estate bills or whatever the case may be. What can be done? I know there's a piece of legislation that's making its way through the legislative process right now where they want to go after some of these scofflaws, and they're basically saying to people who get government checks, who are on the government payroll somewhere, you're not going to get your check unless you pay your bills. Where is that at the moment?
Well, we've been very successful with that legislation this week. It is sitting on the governor's desk, and it's the technical term there is using the controller's offset, but we are the only centralized automated system that we can go after deadbeats to the state of Illinois. So that I should not, as the controller in the state of Illinois, be sending you a check as a vendor, or you a paycheck as a state employee, or a tax refund if you're a deadbeat to the state of Illinois. I ought to be garnishing, intercepting, and seizing to make certain that we aren't paying state funds to somebody who's a deadbeat in the state of Illinois. What we did was, right now, the legislation requires that only after a year can we go after that and use my centralized system. Well, it's only worth 10 cents on the dollar then. You know, unlike fine wine, it doesn't age very well.
Right.
So now this bill gets us down to 90 days, which is best practices, which we worked with Arthur Anderson on. And in terms of being able to use our system, we then will be able to go after those deadbeats earlier, and we will have a better return on the investment.
Once in place, will you be able to use the same concept for going after deadbeat parents, deadbeat dads who may be behind in child support? Not just for those that work for, you know, for state government or city government. I'm talking about everyone who is behind.
If they're getting a check from the state of Illinois, we can go after them through the controller's office, and that's what we're going to do. In fact, the growing receivable in the state of Illinois is child support. It's shameful. We rank dead last out of all the states, And it's something that we can do something about through the controller's offset. That's one management tool. There are other things that you can do. We ran a pilot project with the debt collection board just recently. And for every dollar that public aid spends to collect child support, they get a $2.23 return. We privatized it. For every dollar we spent with this pilot project with a collection service, we ended up getting a $23 return on our investment. So there are many things we can be doing, and we should be doing a better job.
You know, one of the first pieces of financial advice that I think probably anyone watching the show probably received when you were, you know, a youngster was, you know, take some money, you know, put some of it away for the rainy day. So when you have a crisis in your family, you can either go to the mattress or wherever you've got it stored, and you've got some money pushed away. But the state of Illinois really is one of just a few states that doesn't have such a kitty somewhere.
46 states have some form of a rainy day fund. And in fact, there was a recent national newspaper that itemized a number of states, New York, Indiana, New Jersey, Connecticut, a number of them that are looking to return tax dollars to taxpayers because the rainy day fund has an enormous balance. Our neighboring state, Indiana, I believe has something like $1 billion balance in the rainy day fund that they're looking to get back to the taxpayers. We need to do something. You harness the good times to sock away something for those inevitable downturns.
Now, speaking of rainy day funds and funds, what about campaign funds and those people who contribute to Loleta Didrickson? Are those funds going to be used for you to seek re-elections for state controller, or are you going to be running for a higher office?
Well, I have many options. And in fact, yesterday when I left, my husband Charlie said to me, he said, "So what is it today?" I said, "You know, we really are all waiting for an enormously popular governor, Governor Jim Edgar, to make up his mind. I could stand for re-election, absolutely. I have a wonderful job as controller in the state of Illinois. But depending on what the governor does and what George Ryan, two of our top vote getters and two great Republican leaders, it remains to be seen."
Could you beat Carol Mosley Braun?
I believe I could.
Why?
I think you take gender and some of the issues off the table, and then we can really get down to business.
Loleta Didrickson, thanks very much for being with us. Loleta Didrickson, who is the state controller in Illinois, thank you very much for being with us. Again, our conversations with lawmakers talk about a variety of issues, and we ask them, what do you want to see in a utility deregulation bill this session?
I think that the interest of the ratepayers, whether they be residential customers or business customers, are pretty much the same. They want lower rates. The issue is, do we all get it at the same time? The Commonwealth Edison Illinois Power Plan has residential consumers not getting the benefits of competition for many years to come. This is completely unacceptable. We want to see the benefits of competition accrue to all ratepayers and at the same time.
I think any bill that we have is going to have to allow for some choice as far as consumers, and they're going to have to get into the plan relatively early. I mean, the idea of keeping the consumers away from any cost savings and be able to access them through the wheeling process for 5 or 6 years is just not going to work. I think as we look at savings that will come as a result of this are going to have to be shared by all ratepayers.
I can tell you that my phone has been jumping off the hook the last month, people calling about this issue, people who are troubled by the high rates they're paying in utility bills, and they're very, very concerned. And I think a lot of calls have been generated by a lot of radio ads from on efforts on both sides of the issue.
There are two big issues left that, frankly, I think can be resolved. And that is who's going to pay for stranded costs for some of the bigger utilities, such as ComEd, and how they're going to be paid for, and when the different groups of clients or customers are going to come on, residential, business, big business, etc.
We have to ensure that everyone comes on board at the same time with whatever change is made. You know, I think everybody looks back and we see what happened in the deregulation of telephones, and hopefully we'll not make the same mistakes again.
The issue that's going to be before us, and hopefully will be resolved, is whether we're going to phase into competitive rates or whether we're going to get there real quick. I'm not sure where I'm going to wind up on that issue. I understand that we want to get the competitive rates established as soon as possible, but we don't want to kill the goose.
Joining us now on Illinois Lawmakers is one of the new faces in the Illinois State Senate. She is State Senator Debbie Halvorson. She is a Democrat from Crete, and welcome to your first appearance in Illinois Lawmakers. Thanks for staying with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You are a member of the Senate Education Committee, and education has been something that's been near and dear to your heart for quite some time. As you look at the current state of this debate down here, are you confident at this moment in time that there will be some form of an increase in the state income tax to raise the level of funding and to distribute it throughout the state of Illinois equally?
First of all, I can't say I'm confident of anything right now. Things have changed daily. But as a mother of 2 children in public school and a member of the Education Committee, I'm very optimistic that something will be done. Right now, we've seen the model plan that they have that is being worked on. But unfortunately, I don't think too many people are real happy with it. So there's some things that we have to do.
Why aren't they happy with it?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but my neediest school districts get absolutely zero. Schools such as Bloom High School, HF, Rich Township, Ford Heights, my neediest school districts get absolutely zero. And I refuse to support a plan that doesn't give them anything.
Now, some members of the state senate from the Cook County area and some even the collar counties, they are not as concerned about providing a property tax reduction, because if the property tax reduction is coming on the other side of a state income tax increase, they feel that that's not going to satisfy the folks back home. How important is a property tax reduction? And if you personally had to choose one over the other, which would you choose?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, property tax relief is very important in my district. Right now, we're paying some of the highest tax rates on our property tax in the state. First of all, we have no tax base virtually, and almost 70% of our property taxes are what's funding education. So I'm not sure I could pick one or the other, because right now the only way I could support an income tax increase is if it were tied to property tax relief and some sort of responsibility and accountability. Our dropout rates are at an all-time high. We're now ranked at about 31st in the union. Nationally, things have improved by 18%, but in Illinois they've dropped 11%, and that's not good.
Now, although you are a member of the Democratic caucus in the state Senate, it's controlled by Republicans and Senator Pate Phillip, and he has said that he is not going to consider any increase at all unless there is accountability. And accountability is a word that we've heard a lot down here over the last several years. And today in the Chicago Tribune, they had a very strong editorial suggesting that tied with the funding puzzle that has to be dealt with down here is accountability. And I'd like to tick off some of the points that were mentioned to get your thoughts about it. One is the issue of tenure, that some people feel that the teacher should not have tenure, and that tenure locks bad teachers in place and makes it very difficult for bad teachers to be rooted out of the system. How do you feel about tenure?
Well, first of all, I feel that we have some of the best teachers in the state of Illinois, right here and in my district anyway, and I'm not sure that dealing with tenure is something that we need to take care of. We need to take a look at it, and it does need reforming.
Do we have some of the worst teachers as well?
Possibly. Possibly, you could be right.
How do you get rid of them? How do you get rid of a bad teacher?
Well, you know what, and that's, the tenure is getting a bad rap because of that. I really believe there still is due process, and if you really have a bad teacher, there is ways to get rid of them.
What's the due process for a student who is sitting in a classroom with a bad teacher?
And you know what, I understand your concern, because there's a lot of them out there, and there could possibly be, you know, one here or one there, but on the whole, or on the average, you know, even though we do need to take a look at it, I'm not sure that it's doing anything but trying to take attention away from what the real issue is, on changing the funding formula.
Is changing the funding formula more important than changing the quality of the teaching in the classroom?
I don't think you could say more important. I think it's a package. It's something that we need to take a look at overall. It's, you know, because throwing money at a situation isn't always going to make it better.
Now, a lot of people who may be listening to the program this evening would like to perhaps maybe teach. Maybe they don't have a teaching certificate. Maybe they're a little bit older. Maybe they're retired, but they'd like to give something back to their community. Many of them would like to be able to do that, but currently they can't go into a classroom and they cannot share their life's experience before a group of young people that may need that experience. Should that change?
That is something that is being looked at right now. It's called the Alternative Teaching Certificate. As much as I love to go talk to classes, I could be a great lecturer, I could talk to classes and tell them what's going on, but that doesn't make me a good teacher. So we need to really look at some of the ways they want to change things. So there's nothing wrong with someone going in to volunteer their time and take a look at what's going on and talk to the children, but I'm not sure that that makes them a good teacher.
What makes them a good teacher?
Well, I don't know.
But it could be, but what I'm saying is that a person who wants to do that, if they want to do that, there is a desire to go and do that. I mean, that's an element of enthusiasm that could be brought to the communication of one skill to a group of people that do not have skill.
And there are a lot of them out there that are going back to school to be able to go into teaching, and I think that's very admirable.
But right now, the current system is discouraging people from doing that, right?
Possibly.
But I mean, if we're trying to change things, I mean, should government be a little more willing to try some new things, especially since we have a situation where the school system, has had some problems over the last, 20, 30 years?
Sure. I'm sure there's a lot of things out there that need to be taken a look at.
And what about the issue, another point that the Tribune mentioned today, was that block grants, that instead of giving a specific dollar to a school district or to an individual school and saying that they have to use the money that particular way, can that decision best be made at the local level, not here in Springfield?
That decision probably is made at the local level anyway, not necessarily here in Springfield.
And as you look at the other element of dealing with the constituents, when they call your office and ask about education-related matters, what are they ticked off about? Or do they call about education at all?
Yes, they do. And I think what the majority of the people in my district are asking for is just that we do something. It's unfortunate that our state is such a rich state, and we have a lot to offer, but yet we rank 49th.
But if they're telling you to do something, I guess my question is, why does there have to be so much time and effort discussing issues year in, year out, when some of these issues seem to be relatively simple to solve, like an issue of, alternative certification of teachers, like we talked about in the first segment. I mean, we have welfare recipients that need to be trained. We have some people who want to give something back to their community. We have a daycare problem, and we want to bring parents and children together, and we have hundreds of schools or thousands of schools throughout the state of Illinois. Why cannot those resources all be brought together? And frankly, why can't that be something either in a special session that can be done by Republicans and Democrats so they respond to the needs and the demands of the public?
And that's a very good issue, because I found out since I've been here that nothing is easy in Springfield. And the people out in the district do think that they're just some simple decisions to make. But this is no longer a Democrat-Republican issue. It's a regional issue. And I think everybody bipartisanly is going to make the right decisions.
But the pressure to get things done is greater today than it was 5 or 10 years ago, because the frustration with the voters, I think, is growing. Would you acknowledge that?
Oh, and I think it's great. I think it's wonderful that our voters are taking a real part of the process, and that they understand the issues, and that they are my phones ring off the hook all day long, and I'm very happy that the constituents are taking, a part in the process of, letting me know their feelings.
All right, one last question. Do you think there's going to be a tax increase, yes or no?
Possibly. I'm not sure, only because I've seen so much change from day to day.
And time is running out. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
That's
State Senator Debbie Halvorson, a Democrat from Crete, who has joined us on this segment of Illinois Lawmakers. A lot of new lawmakers are down here this spring, and we asked them to tell us about their first few months on their new job.
I think they've been very informative. It's also been very helpful. It's been a lot of work. We have some issues that need to get addressed. For example, the school funding formula issue. I hope and expect to be able to come to some kind of conclusion or resolution before we're due to adjourn.
I'm very excited about the amount of input I've been able to have on healthcare and education issues. Those were the two key goals that I had for my first several years down here, and I've already been able to affect some change in those areas.
I've been pleasantly surprised. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's been very enjoyable. Obviously, the downside's being away from the family, but I've been very happy down here. I think the issues we've tackled this session have all been very important to the people of the state of Illinois, and I'm looking forward to the next 3 weeks to make a lot more progress on those issues.
It's pretty much as I anticipated. I looked at running 5 years ago and came down here on several occasions and made the determination that I didn't have enough governmental experience and went back to Lake County and served on their board for 4 years and a township supervisor. And then when I just looked at running this time, I spent many, many weekends down here observing the process. So it's pretty much what I had anticipated in terms of the process. I also was in the veto session, so I have a little advantage over some of the other freshmen that came down here for the first time in January.
It has really met with my expectations. I had worked on the Senate staff previously, so I knew what to expect. It still gets a little bit frustrating when you think you have a wonderful idea for a bill and you just can't understand why everyone else doesn't agree with you. But overall, it's been pretty much what I've expected.
I've been coming down here for about 20 years or more, lobbying on various township government issues. And so I knew pretty much what I was getting into. But I have to say, 2 weeks ago, after we finished our 3 weeks of 16-hour days, that was quite a grind.
As we leave you tonight, the issues of utility deregulation and also the battle over reforming school funding in the state of Illinois still unresolved. The lawmakers will be working late into the night trying to find an answer to that. We'll have an update on it for you next Wednesday night. And also the issue of an increase in the state income tax, alive and well, still at this hour in Springfield. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. Our thanks to our guests. And we will see you next Wednesday night at the same time. For Jack Titchener, I'm Bruce DuMont.